Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. In the bustling city of Harrison City, social tensions are palpable. The streets are lined with skyscrapers and luxury stores, but the working-class neighborhoods reveal another face, that of mistrust and prejudice. It is in this setting that Officer Ryan Daniels, a white police officer known for his arrogance and latent racism, patrols with a sense of impunity. His reputation is feared among some residents, but he only cares about his authority and power. That day, after a morning of relative boredom at the police station, Daniels noticed Marcus Johnson, 28, a black man with a body sculpted by years of martial arts and UFC competition. Marcus walks out of the Titan gym, his gym bag slung over his shoulder, looking calm and focused on his day. His face is calm, his movements precise and measured, a reflection of the discipline that has made him a respected champion. Daniels, blinded by his prejudices, interprets Marcus's calm as arrogance. Without thinking, he decides to challenge him. Little does he know that this encounter, which was supposed to be a routine check, will turn into a public humiliation and reveal to everyone who truly holds the power to control the situation. Passers-by begin to stop, intrigued by the mounting tension. The air seems to thicken around Marcus and Daniels, as if the city itself is holding its breath. A confrontation is about to unfold, and no one could predict the outcome that would leave everyone speechless. Marcus Johnson walked leisurely along the sidewalk of Harrison City, his gym bag over his shoulder. He had just finished an intense session at the Titan gym and could still feel the adrenaline of the workout coursing through his muscles. The morning sun lit up the glass facades of the buildings, but a dull tension seemed to hang in the air. This is when Officer Ryan Daniels appeared, his patrol car moving slowly behind Marcus. Daniels, a man in his 40s, with a hard gaze and a closed face, scrutinized every passerby with suspicion. Upon seeing Marcus, he frowned. The man's stature, his quiet confidence, and his dark skin triggered an instant reaction of prejudice in him. "Hey! You! Stop!" Daniels shouted, getting out of his car quickly. Marcus stopped and raised his hands slightly, a calm smile on his face. "Hello, officer. Is there a problem?" he asked calmly. Daniels approached, clenching his fists and seething with anger. "Yeah, problem. You walk around here like you belong here, but I don't recognize you. I'm going to have to search you." Passers-by stopped, intrigued. Some took out their phones to film the scene. Marcus, aware of his reputation and expertise, remained calm. He knew that provoking Daniels would only make the situation worse. "Officer, I didn't do anything wrong. I'm just going home after my training session," Marcus replied with unnerving calm. But Daniels, blinded by his arrogance and prejudice, wouldn't listen. He took a step forward, his muscles tense, ready to intimidate. "Listen to me, kid. Around here, I decide who can walk and who can't." Marcus took a step back, not out of fear, but to create space. He assessed Daniels's every move, every tension in his shoulders, every aggressive look. His UFC training had taught him to anticipate brute force and stay in control of his emotions. Passers-by whispered among themselves, impressed by the imposing stature of the two men and the electric tension in the air. Little did they know that this simple exchange would escalate into a confrontation that would leave everyone speechless. Marcus's heart was beating quietly, but every muscle was tense like a bow. He knew Daniels wasn't going to stop at mere words. The officer, blinded by his arrogance and prejudice, took a step forward, clenching his fists. "I told you to stop!" Daniels yelled, his face red with anger. He raised his arm to strike Marcus, thinking to intimidate what he believed to be a private citizen. Marcus dodged with a fluid movement, almost imperceptible to the onlookers. Daniels's fist grazed inches from his cheek. Bystanders held their breath. Marcus didn't immediately retaliate. He wanted the officer to realize his movements were useless. Daniels, furious, attempted another, more brutal attack. This time, he charged Marcus with all his strength. But Marcus, with his years of MMA experience, blocked the blow and used the attacker's strength against him, knocking him backward. What the, stammered a witness, shocked by Marcus's ease and control. The crowd began to murmur, some pulling out their phones to film the scene. Daniels, humiliated by his own clumsiness, tried to regain control. "You think you can resist me?" he yelled, ready to attack again. Marcus, still calm, took a step back and adopted a perfect defensive posture. Daniels's every move was predictable, and Marcus knew exactly how to neutralize the threat without turning it into a deadly confrontation. The scene resembled a duel of titans. Passers-by couldn't believe what they were seeing. A private citizen, dressed in sportswear, was defeating an armed and trained police officer. Disbelief hung in the air. Daniels, blinded by his rage, didn't realize that every misdirected attack brought him closer to public humiliation. Marcus, impassive, controlled the situation with almost military precision. A minute had passed since the beginning of the altercation, and already, no one could believe what they had just seen. Daniels, still furious and flushed with anger, stepped back slightly to catch his breath. His face betrayed disbelief. He had never met anyone capable of countering his attacks with such ease. Marcus, however, remained calm. His dark eyes analyzed the officer's every movement, every tension in his shoulders, every sudden gesture. His breathing was steady, controlled, and his hands remained ready to block or deflect the slightest attempt at a strike. "I told you to respect me," Daniels shouted, charging forward again, a fist raised towards Marcus. This time, Marcus decided to intervene lightly. He dodged the blow and, with a quick, precise movement, shoved Daniels aside, using his own momentum against him. The officer lost his balance and hit the pavement in an embarrassing manner. The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs. "Oh my God!" A woman in the crowd gasped, her hands over her mouth. "How did he do that?" Daniels stood up, humiliated but still furious. He attempted a series of rapid-fire blows, hoping to surprise Marcus. But each move was anticipated and deflected. Marcus wasn't trying to hurt the officer, only to incapacitate him, and each precise move demonstrated his mastery of mixed martial arts. A young man took out his phone to film the scene and whispered, "No one will ever believe this, even if I showed them the video." Daniels, panting and furious, began to lose his bearings. Every attempt to strike backfired. Marcus, calmly and in control, created a safe distance, forcing the officer to tire himself out unnecessarily. The crowd was now captivated. The murmurs had turned into appreciative whispers. Everyone was beginning to realize that they were witnessing an extraordinary spectacle. An ordinary, but trained and disciplined, citizen had overpowered an arrogant police officer in less than 2 minutes. And deep down, Daniels was beginning to understand something inconceivable. He was no longer in a position of strength. Daniels, panting and flushed with anger, tried to regain the initiative. He raised his arm to strike Marcus again, thinking that brute force would eventually get the better of him. But Marcus, with the precision of a UFC champion, dodged the blow and executed a perfect defensive move. In an instant, he used the force of Daniels's attack to completely unbalance him, sending him stumbling to the pavement. A shocked silence fell over the crowd. Witnesses couldn't believe what they were seeing, an experienced, armed police officer being literally outmaneuvered by a private citizen in sports gear. Some filmed with their phones, unable to take their eyes off the scene. Daniels stood up, his hands shaking with rage. He wanted to react, but he was too tired, too disoriented. Marcus, calm and controlled, kept a safe distance while maintaining a perfect defensive posture. Every move Daniels made backfired. "Stop!" Daniels yelled, but his voice sounded hollow, almost ridiculous in the face of Marcus's absolute control. The champion didn't respond with violence, only with precise neutralizing gestures. He stepped forward to block another blow and pushed Daniels aside, leaving him to sit on the pavement, panting and humiliated. The crowd erupted in murmurs and exclamations of admiration. "Unbelievable," whispered one witness. "No one would believe it if they didn't see it." Daniels, publicly humiliated, tried to regain his authority, but the situation was completely out of his control. Passers-by, who only minutes earlier had feared the officer, now looked at him with contempt. Marcus, impassive, showed neither anger nor satisfaction. His mere presence commanded respect. In less than a minute, the dynamic had completely changed. The arrogant officer was nothing more than a disoriented man on the sidewalk, while Marcus embodied control, composure, and dignity. Danielle's reputation had suffered an irreversible blow, and the crowd bore silent witness, in disbelief at what they had just witnessed. The tension in the street was palpable. The crowd, now gathered around Marcus and Daniels, didn't know where to look. Murmurs of admiration mingled with whispers of disbelief. "How is this possible?" whispered a witness, a young man filming the scene. "He's a UFC champion, but he's still a police officer." Danielle's colleagues finally arrived, sirens off, and stopped a few meters away. Their surprise was complete. No one had ever seen their teammate put in such difficulty by a private citizen. The expressions on their faces ranged from disbelief to dismay. Daniels, sitting on the sidewalk, his face red with shame and anger, tried to sit up. This isn't over," he stammered, but his voice sounded weak and wavering. He was no longer in control of the situation. Marcus, for his part, remained perfectly calm. His eyes scanned the crowd calmly, and his gestures were measured. He wasn't trying to intimidate or humiliate Daniels further. His only concern was to defuse the situation while maintaining control. "Listen, everyone," Marcus said in a calm but firm voice, "I'm not looking for trouble. I was simply defending myself. This officer chose to attack me for no reason." His words, clear and measured, had an immediate effect on the crowd. The spectators nodded, understanding that Marcus was not an aggressor but a man capable of defending himself with discipline and intelligence. Danielle's colleagues exchanged embarrassed glances. Some looked away, unable to bear the public humiliation of their comrade. Others murmured among themselves, searching for an explanation for the inexplicable. How could a citizen neutralize a police officer in less than a minute? Daniels, humiliated and exhausted, finally stood up with difficulty, supported by two colleagues. His gestures betrayed his inability to comprehend what had just happened. Marcus took a step back, allowing the officer to regain a semblance of dignity, but the reality was clear: control of the situation had completely changed. The crowd, still stunned, began to move away, murmuring, each mentally sharing what they had just witnessed. Marcus, calm and impassive, watched Daniels walk away, aware that the officer's public humiliation had already made an impression on all the witnesses. Marcus Johnson took a deep breath, feeling the adrenaline of the fight gradually dissipate. The crowd was beginning to murmur, some still in disbelief, others in awe. He raised his hands slightly to gain attention and spoke in a calm but firm voice. "Listen, everyone, I have nothing against him personally," Marcus said, pointing at Daniels, still supported by two colleagues, his features drawn with anger and humiliation. "I was simply defending myself. He chose to attack me for no reason. I was only responding to the threat." Passers-by exchanged astonished glances. The man they saw neutralizing a police officer with such ease was not aggressive, he was measured, calm, and fair. Some whispered among themselves. Unbelievable, he didn't even hurt him. And yet, he completely mastered the situation. Danielle's colleagues, still close, remained silent. Some looked down, unable to contradict Marcus. Others kept their arms crossed, ashamed but powerless. Daniels, panting, slowly sat up and tried to speak, but his voice was weak, almost choked with humiliation. This is an illegal fight," he whispered, more to himself than to anyone else. Marcus nodded slowly, without animosity. "No, officer. I was only defending myself. And I advise you to think twice before doing this in the future." Passers-by's cameras filmed everything. Marcus knew that every word, every gesture, would be reverberating through the city and beyond. His reputation as a disciplined and respectful champion had just been confirmed in a way no one could ignore. The crowd began to applaud softly, respecting Marcus's composure and dignity. The incident was no longer just an altercation, it was a silent lesson in respect, discipline, and controlled strength. Daniels, flushed with anger and shame, finally looked away. Even his colleagues seemed to realize that the authority he believed he possessed had just been undermined in the most public way possible. Marcus, calm and imposing, walked away slowly, leaving behind a scene of awe and consternation. The lesson was clear to all who witnessed the incident: true strength lies not in violence or imposed authority, but in self-control and discipline. Shortly after the incident, videos shot by bystanders began circulating on social media. On every screen, we saw Marcus Johnson, calm and collected, easily neutralizing an arrogant police officer. Hashtags began to appear: #RespectMarcus, #JusticePortu, #HarrisonCity. In homes across the city, families watched the video in shock and fascination. The comments rolled in quickly. "Unbelievable, a UFC champion against a police officer and he didn't even hurt him. Finally, someone who defends himself with dignity. He showed that true strength comes from self-control, not violence." Meanwhile, back at the police station, Daniels tried to justify the incident. But his colleagues, some shocked and others embarrassed, knew that the video had changed everything. It spread quickly, and each view confirmed Daniels's public humiliation. The news even reached the local media. Online newspapers headlined: "UFC champion neutralizes racist police officer in downtown." The public humiliation of an officer in the face of a disciplined citizen. Marcus, for his part, wasn't seeking glory. He went about his day as usual, returning home after calmly explaining the situation to witnesses. But he knew the incident had already left a mark on the public consciousness. The comments on social media and on the streets were unanimous: Marcus embodied respect and discipline, while Daniels came across as arrogant, reckless, and humiliated. Even residents accustomed to fearing police authority began to discuss the incident, some expressing support for Marcus, others expressing dismay at the officer's behavior. In the police chief's office, Daniels was summoned to account. Still red with shame, he realized that the video's virality meant the incident could never be erased. Marcus had turned an unjustified attack into a lesson in discipline and self-control, and now the whole world could witness it. The next day, news of the incident had spread. Harrison City local newspapers and news sites published detailed articles, some accompanied by viral videos. UFC champion Marcus Johnson had neutralized a racist police officer without ever injuring him. At the police station, Daniels was summoned by the police chief. His face betrayed anger mixed with shame. He knew his actions would have consequences, but he couldn't imagine the extent of the public humiliation. "Daniels," the chief said gravely, "your behavior is unacceptable. You attacked a citizen for no reason, and now your video is circulating everywhere. You are suspended until further notice, and a disciplinary investigation is underway." Daniels tried to protest, but the leader's firm gaze cut him off. There was nothing more to say. His authority had been completely undermined, and the entire town had witnessed it. Meanwhile, Marcus calmly continued his daily life. He returned to training and then to his apartment, receiving messages of support from all sides: neighbors, UFC fans, and even people who had never heard of him before this incident. On the streets, residents spoke of Marcus with respect. Young people from the neighborhood sometimes came to greet him, inspired by his discipline and self-control. He had become a symbol, proof that true strength lies not in violence or imposed authority, but in control, discipline, and dignity. Daniels, for his part, saw his reputation crumble. His colleagues now looked at him differently, some with contempt, others with dismay. Social media and local news outlets continued to remind everyone what had happened. The public humiliation was complete, and Daniels now had to face the consequences of his actions, both professionally and socially. Marcus, calm and collected, watched all this from afar. He had never sought glory, but he understood that his behavior had sent a powerful message: in the face of injustice and racism, self-control and disciplined strength always overcome violence and arrogance. A few days later, Daniels was summoned to an official meeting at the police station, surrounded by his superiors and several colleagues. His face red with shame, he knew that this time there was no way to escape the consequences. The viral video had been broadcast all over the local media, and public opinion was demanding action. The police chief spoke, his gaze firm. "Daniels, your behavior is unacceptable. You attacked a citizen for no reason and jeopardized your career and the reputation of our department." Daniels tried to answer, but his words were hesitant and weak. "But, he stammered, unable to finish his sentence. Another officer, who had observed the incident closely, added. What Marcus Johnson showed wasn't just physical strength. It was discipline, control, and courage. You, on the other hand, let your arrogance and prejudices get the better of you." Daniels felt anger and shame mingling in a bitter mixture. Every word spoken by his superiors was a cruel reminder of the public humiliation he had suffered. Meanwhile, Marcus wasn't physically present, but his name resonated throughout the room. He had become a symbol of mastery and dignity, even to those who had long despised his community. Daniels' superiors were clear, severe sanctions were inevitable, and he needed to reflect on his actions and their impact. Outside the city, Marcus's reputation continued to grow. Locals spoke of him with admiration. Young athletes were inspired by his mastery, while the media emphasized the importance of discipline and respect in confronting injustice. Daniels, humbled and aware of the lesson he had just learned the hard way, finally understood that true strength lies not in violence or imposed authority, but in self-control and discipline. The weeks following the incident changed Harrison City. Marcus Johnson, through his discipline and self-control, had become a symbol throughout the city. Local and national media reported the story again and again, highlighting his calm, strength, and courage in the face of injustice. In working-class neighborhoods, young people spoke of Marcus with admiration. Many of them now trained according to his example, discipline, respect, and self-control. His attitude demonstrated that true strength came not from violence or imposed authority, but from self-control and dignity in the face of provocation. Daniels, meanwhile, had been suspended and was facing a serious disciplinary investigation. His colleagues, and even citizens once tolerant of his arrogance, now looked at him with contempt. Every time his name appeared in the newspapers, it was a reminder of his shameful behavior and public humiliation. He had learned, the hard way, that arrogance and racism could never prevail over discipline and self-control. Marcus, despite the recognition and attention he received, remained humble. He resumed his training, his routines, and his daily life with the same serenity. He knew that his victory was not just physical, but symbolic. He had shown that courage, discipline, and dignity were more powerful than fear, hatred, and arrogance. The city had learned its lesson: true strength lies not in brutality, but in self-control. Marcus Johnson had turned an unjust attack into a lesson for all, and his name would henceforth be synonymous with respect, inspiration, and resilience. And as life continued in Harrison City, every resident who witnessed the event knew that sometimes calm and composure can change the course of events, and that injustice can be faced with dignity and strength.